Today I'm going to talk about community land trusts and permanently affordable housing, which is basically methods of retaining the affordability of a home. Once you've used things like home or CDBG, you want to ensure that those kind of investments, both public and private, are maintained and aren't just kind of wasted on your initial homeowner. You want to make sure that beyond that first homeowner, your affordability levels, I'm going all over the place here, your affordability levels are maintained so that your initial homeowner doesn't receive some sort of windfall of equity on a home that used public or private resources to be built. So here's a project that we're working on up in Big Sky. To the stakeholders' credit in the community of Big Sky, they realized that the lifeblood of their resort community are the service industry workers and your teachers and firefighters. And so, as Tracy mentioned earlier, they used resort tax funding to support this project to the tune of just over $1 million. And with that, we'll be able to build between 24 and 32 permanently affordable units for home ownership for the community of Big Sky. So we're really excited about this project, and we really feel like it can serve as a template for other communities in difficult housing markets to kind of use this as a template on how to kind of start to address your affordable housing needs. So basically, what is a community land trust and what is a permanently affordable housing? So community land trusts are essentially nonprofit organizations that provide lasting community assets and permanently affordable opportunities for low-income housing. I actually found our colleagues over at Trust Montana had a better definition for this, so I'm going to read theirs. A community land trust is a form of common land ownership with a charter based on the principles of sustainability and stewardship. The land in a CLT is held in a trust by a governed nonprofit corporation, and through an inheritable and renewable long-term lease, the trust removes land from the speculative market and facilitates multiple uses such as affordable housing. So essentially what it does is when you have a land trust home, you've taken the land out of the equation. So the cost of the home, you can reach deeper levels of affordability because the land isn't part of the cost of the home. How it works is the homeowners only own the improvements on a property, where a nonprofit like HRDC would retain ownership of the land underneath that. And with that ownership, they can put restrictions on those homes to retain the affordability. Things like income limits, things like capital improvement policies, things like caps on appreciation. So you can cap the appreciation at, say, 3 or 5% so that the house increases in value, but it does so commensurate generally with the growth of wages in an area. So where can you find community land trusts? While they're relatively new in Montana, they're basically nationwide. They started in the East in communities like Burlington, Vermont, where they realized that having people from different socioeconomic kind of walks of life were important to a community. Having that economic vibrancy is critical. And so now we're starting to see that recognition in communities across the West. I actually come to HRDC from a community land trust in Park City, Utah, where we faced an incredibly acute housing shortage and established a land trust and some inclusionary zoning policies to create affordable housing for the local workforce. As I mentioned earlier, how do they work? They basically are a way for people to attain and sustain home ownership. You, how do I hit pause there? Maybe that'll do it. Yeah, right. She's really keeping us on the clock. Yeah, it's just, I think I got it. No, I didn't. Anyways, so basically what it does is it kind of acts as an intermediate step in between long-term rentals and market rate home ownership so that a person can get out of a long-term rental situation, get into this kind of pseudo home ownership situation where they're able to build equity, build some assets, and hopefully walk away with a down payment that's large enough to buy a market rate home. That's kind of how they envision these things working. But what it really does is it stabilizes the neighborhoods, it stabilizes the community, it provides that economic vibrancy, but it also puts people into a home ownership situation where they are seeing significantly less foreclosure proceedings on these community land trust and permanently affordable housing. As you can see, they are dramatically lower than the loans on the market rate homes. And a lot of that is because to get into these community land trust homes and permanently affordable housing, there's usually an accompanying homebuyer education. There's a home ownership class to make sure people know exactly what they're getting into when they, I'm having the hardest time with this. It is just...
I will click for you in the screen.
Thank you. So when they get into this home ownership situation, they know exactly what they're getting into, and they know what's expected of them as a homeowner. They know what kind of costs are to be anticipated. They know how to budget. They know how to maintain their homes. And that's why you're seeing significantly less foreclosure proceedings on these homes. But I'll go to the next slide. But what do they accomplish? As I mentioned earlier, they increase access to lower income and moderate income families. Affordable home ownership, as Tracy mentioned earlier, is an extremely relative term, particularly when you're working in a community like Big Sky, where you have some pretty high, you have people making solid incomes, but they're still being priced out of the market. And like Tracy mentioned earlier, and there's a reason why we're kind of repetitive. We sit so close to each other, we just are an echo chamber. So all of my talking points are very similar to Tracy's. But they do buffer the adverse impacts of high-end development. So in a community, you'll see, particularly a resort community, the ups and downs of the tourism industry. Having these affordable land trust homes kind of buffers people, or buffers the market from the ups and downs of the real estate market by providing year-round homeowners who are going to provide business to your grocers, to your restaurants, and they're also providing an additional tax base for the community. So it does stabilize neighborhoods. It creates owner occupancy that gives them a financial foothold in terms of their financial literacy, and it also creates a good groundwork. And then it also, you'll see, well, like I mentioned earlier, preventing foreclosures, residential stability. You also see a lot less mobility in terms of students. When their parents own a home, they tend to move around less. So there's more stability in terms of the home, and that actually does have some impacts on your educational attainment as well. And then I actually will I won't share the story, but essentially, I'm trying to keep this brief, but what we're seeing in communities that have implemented the community land trust model is as Tracy mentioned, an increased vibrancy, a year-round presence where you don't have kind of those shoulder seasons where you have people who are contributing to the community year-round. But you also have, which is a major benefit, but there's also a major benefit to the local economy when you have the wages that are being earned in your community being spent in your community. And that's why I always like to kind of talk about this issue as an economic development issue versus a housing issue. Because for a community like Big Sky, we did our market study, and 83% of their workforce is out commuting. And that erodes your local economy, what it does. You have these excellent salaries that are being earned in Big Sky and then being spent in Belgrade, in Bozeman, in Four Corners, and even in Livingston in some cases. And that really doesn't behoove your local economy in the long term. It really cuts the legs out from under a community that's really trying to develop and grow. And I think, Gardner and Livingston are suffering from some of these same issues, and we're seeing that some of the local businesses aren't able to retain or even attract a lot of the talent that they need because there is simply no option for them in terms of housing. So It's an excellent economic development strategy, and I welcome any questions that you have. Yeah, just go to the last one.
Great, and we'll maybe hold questions until the end.